We're just over 2 weeks away from the finish of the season in Hong Kong, and with that, the end of an era in Hong Kong racing as legendary trainer John Moore prepares to retire from racing here. This is what's coming up on a special edition of Hong Kong Direct, and we're going to be reflecting on the career of John Moore here in Hong Kong and hearing from the man himself reflecting on what's been a remarkable career over the last 50 years in Hong Kong racing. Who better to help to tell that story with me than Alan Aitken, someone who's been covering racing here in Hong Kong for many, many years. Hatch, thanks for joining us on the show.
My pleasure, Ed. A look at one of the absolute icons of Hong Kong racing.
Absolutely. There's been a lot of changes in Hong Kong racing since the start of the professional era in 1971, but there's been one constant, John Moore. That changes as of a couple of weeks' time.
Well, I think I saw a quote from John the other day, Ed, that the Moore family has been synonymous with Hong Kong racing, and that is so true. The professional part of the Hong Kong racing history opened with his father as a champion trainer. His brother was a champion jockey on many occasions, and then of course John followed in his father's footsteps, took over the stable and kept going right through. It's 50 years almost of tremendous history in Hong Kong racing.
It is indeed, and they had terrific careers, George and also Gary, training and riding, and George himself, of course, being one of the most famous jockeys ever in Australian racing history. But John's emerged from their shadow, I guess, in the early part of their careers and has now forged his own incredibly successful career as a trainer here. Yeah,
and I guess if you think about it logically, perhaps he did have to become a famous trainer rather than a jockey, because as you said, no better reputation as a jockey than George Moore. Many still regard him as the greatest jockey Australia's ever produced. Gary riding classic winners in Europe, as well as his handful of championships here in Hong Kong. I mean, they were great jockeys. They weren't good jockeys, they were great jockeys. So to emerge from that shadow, John really had to take a different path and has carved out his own niche.
Well, on this week's show, we're paying tribute to John Moore, and today we're going to start off with part one of a two-part special on John as we look back at his time in Hong Kong. We start with part one, looking back at the early years of his career.
I don't think I could have done any more than what I've done over the past few years. The credibility the Moore stable has given to racing Hong Kong and the worldwide recognition. I think I've won every cup on the Jockey Club calendar, and so I'm leaving Hong Kong with the satisfaction that I've done everything I had to do. I remember my first winner. It was Connie Tub, a name that was taken from one of the Three Musketeers. That was my first winner as a professional. But as I said, I was more Dad's work rider.
Brother John rode an amateur first of all in Hong Kong, and when it turned professional in '72, he would ride track work with me. He also race rode. He rode very well, except he struggled to do the weight. But we were a great combination, you know, led by Dad, of course, and John and myself, and as you could see by the success we had.
'85, I was licensed, and the story goes, as everybody knows, it took time. I was leading trainer in the first season, but that was because of what Dad left me and everything. I would have had to be pretty bad not to be. But believe me, I still had a lot to learn, even though I'd spent time with some of the world's greats. Now, as time went on, I hadn't really won all these Group 1 races. So I remember Distinction won a group for me, then we won our first Gold Cup.
It's Distinction taking the lead from Handclap. Prime Rate can't pick them up. Distinction in front and one. Distinction won at a half length from Handclap. Prime Rate third from Morning Patrol.
I was very lucky that Brent Thompson introduced me to a good friend of his, and that friend turned out to be John Foote. So I immediately got together with John, and John taught me nearly everything, you know, I needed to know before I went out on my own with George.
Here comes River Verdon, absolutely powering home. Motivation got away by a length to Marildo, and Motivation wins the cup. Motivation beat Bavane, close for third. That is an outstanding display, and John Marshall takes honours. Motivation has won the cup.
That's when Makapura Star came along, Horse of the Year, won the Derby, 2 Gold Cups, and that was really my first taste of winning big races. He was my first superstar.
Makapura Star by a length, Electric Flash wearing him down, then Master Eagle at the 100, he goes for the whip on Makapura Star, a half to Electric Flash, and Makapura Star's too good, he wins the Derby a neck. Makapura Star takes John Moore to his first Hong Kong Derby. Well, he's a superb trainer, and he did really produce this horse to a T to win the 1995 Hong Kong Derby. Makapura Star's burst away, a length at the 100 metres from Jade Age and River Verdon, and Makapura Star wins the Gold Cup a length. Makapura Star and Survey King neck and neck. Makapura Star the outside, Survey King the fence. A great finish between the pair. The 2 John Moore gallopers had a real war of tenacity down the straight, a real titanic struggle.
As Brian Kahn had started to import some European horses and winning a lot of the big races in Hong Kong in the late 90s, I started to really take notice that you bring these horses in from Europe and you're going to win these big races. So I said to John Foote at the time, okay, I need to catch up with Luke Lettingston, and we need to focus also, instead of buying private purchases or tried horses in Australia, we had to focus on buying tried horses in Europe.
Viva Bataka rushes up to Hello Pretty, staying on out wide. Hail the Storm making ground. Stanley Ho can get anything he wants, but you can't buy this. You must earn it, and Viva Bataka does. Wins the Derby.
Yeah, Viva Bataka was sourced by Lennox and Bloodstock. When I had a look at him, I looked and I went, oh my God. He was knock-kneed, didn't have great feet, good size, physically just okay, but there was something, some gut feeling there that told me, oh, take a chance, take a chance. $1 million US later, Dr. Ho taking him on, and didn't we have a fabulous trip with him?
Here's Viva Bataka winding up at the right time. Viva Bataka races to the lead inside the 250. Admire Moon on the outside is trying hard. It's Viva Bataka clear from Vengeance of Rain. Admire Moon and Sir Ernesto all fighting on, but it's Viva Bataka, a John Moore, Mick Cannan double.
He's been an exceptional example of someone who can, acquire a horse from overseas in particular, and win the big races in Hong Kong with it, which is no mean feat. I mean, it's quite difficult to get horses from Europe or Australia to make the adaptation to Hong Kong and go on and be Group 1 horses, and he's done that very successfully.
It's Able One in front. He's getting tired. He's got it won though, and Able One for Mick Cannan. Able One. John Moore might have snagged the Quinella.
I've known him since I was a young fella, since I was 13 actually. And he's obviously set some great records in Hong Kong for most trainers to chase.
Collection well clear from Thumbs Up. He's sticking to his guns, but Collection, here's Hong Kong's next superstar, Collection.
When he picked up training then himself in 1985, I would say he was a little bit a slow starter. But I think if you look then, especially from 2006, he has been a major contributor to really world-class racing. And he has really helped us, with the owners, to bring Hong Kong racing to amazing heights we have now.
This has been a big effort. Able One in front of Cityscape. Extension late. Able One in front. Able One takes out the mile. Beedman getting stuck into Mighty High. Mr. Medici, he's running out of ground and Mighty High gets in.
He's a workaholic. He's a neatness freak. But more than anything, you know, his timing, especially with the big races, he gets a horse on song and gets him to blossom at the right time, and he's renowned for that.
It's Able One being tackled by Lucky 9 Extension. Ambitious Dragon the fence. Glorious Days in the centre. Great finish. Extension goes through and makes it back-to-back victories.
Definitely got better. When I first kicked off, I was always a little worried about setting horses' programs up, and having that confidence that I have now. I didn't have it then. It took so many years to really come to grips with how to train racehorses.
He certainly learned to be one of the best, John Moore. Stay with us for the show on Friday, when we'll be looking at some of the more recent successes and champions that John Moore has trained in the last few years here in Hong Kong. Don't go anywhere though. On the other side of this break, we'll be back with Alan Aitken reflecting on John Moore's career. Welcome back. It's good to have your company on this edition of Hong Kong Direct. We're racing on Wednesday at Sha Tin, a public holiday day meeting. If you want a full race-by-race preview of the meeting, on Tuesday night Hong Kong time, go to the Multimedia Showcase section of the website. You'll see Racing to Win there, and the team will have all the winners there for you, hopefully. While Alan Aitken has already got the winning factor with a couple of tips for the meeting as well too. Alan is here with us in the studio for Hong Kong Direct. Alan, we just saw the first part there of our John Moore interview. What did you take away from that?
Well, I think it's interesting to hear John describe himself and to hear Winfred describe him as a slow starter. Of course, he won the championship in his first year. His father had walked out of the stable and John walked in basically as the trainer. So he had the championship winning string from the year before. But having said that, John did win 5 of the first 10 premierships that he tackled. So he might be underselling himself a little bit there as a slow starter. He and Brian Can, of course, had some great competition during the 80s. They won 9 of the championships, or 8.5 of the championships. Of course, John dead-heated one year with David Hill. And I think the late part of the 80s or early part of the 90s was a very significant change to Hong Kong. And it may have helped pave the way to John's success later, because the club started to bring in some trainers from overseas with very big resumes. Up until then, there had been expat trainers here, of course, but they weren't the type of trainers that started coming in from about 1990 onwards. Neville Begg was the first one, later David Hayes, Ivan Allen, and these were guys who had big resumes where they came from. They'd won everything. And I think that changed the nature of training in Hong Kong a little bit. Also, I guess they were people who brought more expensive, higher profile horses in as well. So it helped to lift the profile of the horses here. And I think all of that seems to have had an effect on John. One of the things that I guess a lot of people don't appreciate nowadays with John's career in Hong Kong, he went for 10 years without a Group 1 between Makapura Star and Viva Pitaka. And along the way, the guys that I've mentioned, Ivan Allen, David Hayes, Brian Can, they all left. And I think there was a vacancy there for someone to take over and be the big trainer. And I think you've got to admire the way that John remade himself. As he said, he started bringing in basically higher level handicap kind of horses from Britain. They weren't the A-grade Group 1 stars there, but they were good handicappers. And he knew from the evidence of a few horses Brian Can had won here with, that those horses would cut it if they acclimatised and got going properly in Hong Kong. They would cut it as high-class horses. And I think it was a really smart move that he made. And he also went and did the work, which I think doesn't happen all the time with trainers importing horses from Europe. I know John and Gary, they used to spend the off-season driving around in Britain and knocking on doors and pulling horses out of stables and looking at them all over. He really did the hard yards and he got the results.
So do you think his success as far as sourcing horses is concerned, Hats, is one of the reasons why he has got this incredible record as a trainer here?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's it's a key point. It's a bit like, you know, a jockey can't win without a good horse. Well, a trainer can't win without a good horse. You can't just magically put an engine in something that hasn't got one. But sourcing them at the right price and the right kinds of horses, you know, horses that would settle down to the Hong Kong lifestyle, which isn't always easy, horses which had the kinds of feet that would handle the harder tracks here. I think there are a number of reasons why John's sourcing became so much better with those kinds of horses than anyone else. And of course, from 2006 onwards, it was just open slather. He just turned up with if not the best 4-year-old every year, then one of the best 4-year-olds would be in his stable. And he was a player in the Derby and all the big races every time they went around.
One final question for you, Hats, on John Moore and his career and the Moore family as well. We referred to their achievements in racing earlier on. What will be John's legacy and, in general, the Moore family legacy on Hong Kong racing when we look back on it in years to come?
Well, I think the Moore family name did do something for Hong Kong. I think in the early days, his father coming here when George Moore had had a star-studded career in Australia. He could have gone anywhere and trained. He could have taken his big name to Europe, and he decided to come to Hong Kong. I think that was a real wake-up call that Hong Kong was a coming place, and to then have guys like Gary Moore and Tony Cruz, of course, but Gary from the Moore family go and transplant himself in Europe and be a big name. That added to Hong Kong's reputation. And finally, John has added the lustre with those good horses that have sat at the top of the international classifications, and handicappers have said they're, you know, in the top horses in the world. I think all of that along the 50-year journey has driven up the prominence of Hong Kong racing, really brought it to attention. And I agree entirely. Hong Kong wouldn't be where it is today without the Moore family.
Well, John Moore is well represented in our feature race coming up on Wednesday at Sha Tin. It's race number 8, the Hong Kong Reunification Cup, a Class 2 over 1,800 metres, starting with the top weight for John Moore in Savvy 9, who's been contesting group races recently. Butterfield was brave last time out, but has drawn another bad gate. Columbus County's having his second run back from a freshen-up. Glorious Artist is better known for his exploits on the dirt. Nakoni Express goes into the race second up. Over the page to Righteous Doctrine, who's been in terrific form this season. Helena Baby was unlucky last time out. Hello Daddy is stepping up in class, as is Champion Supreme. Let's see if we can find the winner here, Hats, then, for Wednesday's feature. Let's start off with Nakoni Express and also Right Choice, who are coming out of the same race at Sha Tin. Nakoni Express, this was his first run back from a break. How much do you think he'll come on for this run?
Well, they jumped out of trees to back this horse, Nakoni Express. He hadn't raced for, I think, 5 months or 6 months, and it was really a pretty big ask for him to win first up after that break. And as you can see here, he came into the race like he was going to be in the finish and got very tired down the final 200 metres. I think he will come on a lot for that, and I think we'll see a much better version of him on Wednesday.
Another key form race is at Happy Valley, featuring the likes of Butterfield, who I thought was game of defeat in this race. Helena Baby has raced since this, was unlucky. And Columbus County as well too finished off nicely, as did Righteous Doctrine. Who are you taking out of this from form point of view for Wednesday?
Well, I'm not really taking any of these out of the race for Wednesday, because I think that they finished in a big bunch there. They are much of a muchness, that group of horses. There are a couple of them that might have chances. I think if there's a serious danger to a fitter Nakoni Express, it actually comes from a race we haven't seen, and that is Champion Supreme. he has been flying in his Class 3 races. He won't know himself with a lightweight on Wednesday. He's been carrying up near the top weights for a while now and going well. Unlucky in one run recently, and he's the alternative John Moore runner, I guess, down the bottom of the weight, Savvy 9 up the top. But he's the horse I see as the danger to Nakoni Express.
Okay, but Nakoni Express then is your tip for the race?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Hard to beat.
Okay, so Nakoni Express, good push there from Hats for the Hong Kong Reunification Cup, which is the feature of a 10-race card coming up at Sha Tin on a public holiday meeting on Wednesday. 5 meetings left for the season. Here's what's coming up in Hong Kong racing. We've got a meeting, as I said before, at Sha Tin on Wednesday for the public holiday card. Then the usual Sunday at Sha Tin and back at Happy Valley on Wednesday night next week as we draw to a close for season 2019-2020. Before we finish up with the show then, Hats, thanks for coming on. A highlight for you as far as John Moore's career is concerned, a highlight race or horse when you look back on it all for him?
Well, we've seen some great horses from the yard over the last, certainly the last decade and a half, but a standout for me was Able Friend. I think he's, along with Silent Witness, I think they're the best horses I've seen in my time in Hong Kong. And Able Friend's win in the Hong Kong Mile, the race was an interesting setup because Douglas White ran away in front on Gold Fun, trying to steal some sort of a break, and all it really did was put the tempo up a notch, and Able Friend, he just took advantage of that and blew them away.
He did indeed. It was one of Big Red's signature moments and a special moment as well too for John Moore. That's it for the show. More about John Moore as we pay tribute to him on Friday. But until then, sit back, relax and enjoy this super performance from Able Friend in the 2014 Hong Kong Mile.
23.9 the first 400 metres, and Gold Fun trying to make all and go one better than last year. Leads by 2 lengths on Secret Sham. Last year's winner Glorious Days taking closer order. Grand Prix Boss forced deeper. Then Fiero from Hatter's Goal. World Aces hugging the fence and pinching plenty of ground on the turn. Further back to Trade Storm now. Marrera looking to angle somewhere here on Able Friend. He's all strung up into the straight. He's got Hatter's Goal and he's outside. Gold Fun might be gone here. Secret Sham and Glorious Days race to the front. No, Gold Fun's got something in reserve. Now Able Friend with the last shot at them, and Big Red is starting to lengthen. All 1,300 pounds of him, and away he goes. Able Friend from last has put play to them quickly. Gold Fun resiliently battling on for second, but Able Friend bolts up for Joe Marrera.